So basically, the two readings were about Bloom's Taxonomy, the revised edition, technically revised taxonomy, and it was just interesting to catch a background of Bloom's taxonomy because I hadn't really had a uh, a background of it. So one of the first things I noticed in the first article I read, a revision of Bloom's taxonomy and overview. Um, it gave basically a great description of what Bloom's taxonomy is, and it basically said that it is used to gauge student cognitive areas that teachers are hitting or are not hitting, and basically how to go around making sure that you hit every area that a student should be getting to. And there are actually a lot of these different steps. um, and the most interesting part was looking at the revised taxonomy and how those steps had changed. But I'll get to that later once we get to the revised taxonomy. So the another interesting quote from the reading basically said that more often than not, teachers were hitting a heavy emphasis on objectives requiring only cognition or recall of information, objectives that fall in the knowledge category. And the knowledge category is basically the first of the original taxonomy. Um, and so if it's focusing just on recall, students aren't really working with the material. They're basically just, and I use this quote too much, but regurgitating information, which is not what we want them to do. We want them to take the information and be able to change it around, look at it from different perspectives, maybe try things out, experiment a little, but not just recall. And what's interesting is that this is in contrast of what are pretty much considered the most important goals in education, which are comprehension and synthesis. And it's that comprehension that means, oh, I don't just say this. I truly understand what is happening here in Bloom's, or in whatever you're talking about. I was thinking about for me in Bloom's taxonomy. And also there's a part of synthesis, which synthesis is the part of picking something up, turning it on its side, looking at it, analyzing it, and understanding what truly is going on with something. And the structure of the taxonomy is basically, it goes from simple to complex. Simple being knowledge, and complex being the end goal, which is synthesis. But actually on the original taxonomy, synthesis is the fifth stage, and evaluation is the sixth stage. So evaluation is the end stage, or the most abstract or complex. And also categories were ordered from concrete to abstract. So pretty concrete, the fact that knowledge is knowledge, but more abstract is being able to create it, do something creatively with some kind of information that you're given. There's two main ingredients to an objective, which I found pretty useful for me. The description of what is done basically is your goal or your approach. But there's also a part of content. So you have your content, however, you also have your goal or approach about getting that content to where the students can understand it. And by using the 6 different levels of taxonomy, with rather the original taxonomy or revised, that's how you're going to be able to gauge how students are learning. And a big part of these articles was about going from students just knowing knowledge to be able to use it, especially on standardized testing. And so here's an example I just found really interesting. The students shall be able to remember the law of supply and demand in economics. And so it's interesting how the article broke it down, and it said basically there's going to be a noun or noun phrase in every goal, which the noun or noun phrase in that was law of supply and demand. And then there's also a verb or verb phrase, remember. And this comes into play especially later because using that verb remember deals a lot with how you're going to have your students basically be assessed on that specific goal or objective. So that was the old taxonomy, or the original taxonomy. The revised taxonomy had interesting changes to it. One of the interesting changes was metacognitive knowledge and the fact that students are aware of their own knowledge, which is something I've heard before, but it's good to hear again. Also, there's changes in the names in the revised taxonomy, especially the wording change. Like here's basically what had happened. There was knowledge in the original taxonomy, or we'll do it this way: knowledge in the original taxonomy, and then there was remember in the revised taxonomy. So knowledge, then remember. The other one was comprehension, understand. And so both of those, remember and understand, seem more tangible to me as an educator than knowledge and comprehension. Remember, understand seems more basic. What do I want the students to know? The original taxonomy felt very formal to me. And then there's, of course, application and apply, analysis and analyze, evaluation, which was actually changed. It's moved up one. So it's actually the 5th level versus the 6th level. And it moved to evaluate. And then synthesis is the final stage, and then create. So both of those actually switch with each other. And the interesting is that the wording changed from basically a stagnant term, such as evaluation, to a proactive, forward-moving, and productive evaluate. And it made it very active. And for me, as an educator, it really got my mind thinking of how am I going to push forward with this concept I want them to understand. There's also a taxonomy table they introduced, which I'm very interested in using, which I feel like I could really use in my classroom and see which levels am I hitting, which am I not hitting, which ones do I need to work more on, which ones are is my unit not getting to, and then I can be like, oh, okay, now I need to get them to think of perhaps application. How are they going to apply this in their own lives? Or synthesis. Are they creating things? Are they doing tableaus and theater and writing plays, or are they just sitting there reading plays and stuck in the knowledge and comprehension part? All right, and the other article, which I'll get to real quick, this is a really long video, is the role of assessment in the revised taxonomy, and it basically talked about using assessment with the revised taxonomy, which I prefer, and I wonder if that's why it's called revised, because more modern. I would appreciate it more. One of the really good quotes. Actually, I'll just paraphrase things here. The information that basically you get from assessment deals a lot with what you taught during instructional period. So what I taught is clearly shown in the assessment, and if it's not, then I know that something went wrong. Maybe I was hoping for them to recall information. However, when I assessed, I had them basically not recall information, if that makes sense. Let's say I wanted them to create something, create a piece of live theater. However, I just had them write it versus creating. These are interesting examples, but I'm just trying to think of how I could use this in theater, which is getting my mind going, which is good because I'm transforming my own thinking by reading these articles. Yeah, basically that was all I got from the second article, was that there's a lot of assessment ways of doing assessment. Here's a really good quote. Because the taxonomy table focuses on student learning rather than student performances, it emphasizes the need to focus on the cognitive process and types of knowledge required to achieve the standards rather than the specific or general types of items included on statewide assessments. Basically, in layman's terms, we're focusing on student learning. We're focusing on the process versus product, which is different from what the state is having us do in the classroom, which is a lot of statewide assessments, standardized testing, and whatnot. And the interesting thing to note in the second article is the use of wording, because if your goal is students can recall something, then your assessment will actually say a recalling verb such as list, name, tell. And so it's interesting to think of how the wording of the assessment matches and is congruent, I guess, to the wording of the goal or objective. And that's my video blog for Bloom's taxonomy and the revised taxonomy. Thank you for listening.